How you been, Joey?
Hello. Good to see you.
How'd all these people get in your room?
You're gonna start already, huh?
No, I'm not starting.
How are you?
I'm almost through.
What seemed effortless on his own variety show suddenly looked unstable under Carson's tighter, more disciplined format. Johnny did his best to ride the wave, tossing Dean soft pitches, easy questions, familiar setups, the kind of lines Dean could normally knock out of the park without thinking. But this time, Martin kept cutting him off mid-sentence, drifting into half-finished stories, or abruptly standing up and wandering toward the band as if he'd forgotten the camera was still pointed at him. He mixed up movie titles, couldn't remember which film he was there to promote, and would occasionally freeze mid-thought, staring into space as if the idea just slipped out of his mind and vanished.
You weren't on last night.
I certainly was.
You were not. I watched that little girl sing.
What little girl sing?
One of the angels, Cheryl Ladd.
No, you were watching Charlie's... No,
that was Monday night.
That was Monday night.
I wasn't here then.
No, that was Monday night.
They had that Rainier guy from... Oh, no, Bob Reiner.
Rob Reiner.
Rob, yeah.
Huh?
It's close to Rainier, yeah.
Producers quietly began padding the schedule whenever Dean was on the rundown, fully aware that his segments could run long, stall out, or force an emergency commercial break. The legend still appeared in glimpses, a sharp one-liner, a perfectly timed grin, but each visit now felt like a coin toss between classic Dean Martin and a man slipping out of sync with the persona that once made him untouchable. Number 2, Ed McMahon. This one stunned audiences because Ed was Carson's anchor, the unshakable sidekick who never lost his footing. Except for one unforgettable night. He introduced Joan Embry from the San Diego Zoo, and it became immediately clear that Ed was noticeably drunk. He latched onto a single detail: how many years Joan had been appearing on the show. Was it 7? 8? 9? Ed couldn't let it go. He kept circling back, arguing with Johnny about the number, insisting he was right even as the studio laughed and the truth drifted further out of reach.
About 9 years.
Right, yeah. Several plus several will be about 9.
You said 7 or 8.
No, I no, I didn't say 7 or 8. I said several.
Then you said 7 or 8, and I said
Did
it's
I?
9. Yes.
9. Good, thank you.
Yeah. Some of the animals you had as babies are now 10 years old.
That would be about right.
When Johnny attempted to steer the show back on track, Ed slid further off course, drifting into slurred anecdotes about baby lions that barely connected to anything Joan had brought. Carson kept trying to pull the reins, gently teasing Ed about needing a nap, nudging him to snap out of it, but nothing landed. Ed wavered between oddly defensive and unexpectedly sentimental, talking in circles while Johnny did everything he could to keep the segment from completely unraveling.
Remember the animals that did something funny on your tie?
Yes.
Those little lions and little baby lions were 1 year old.
That's right.
They are now treacherous and ferocious 10-year-old animals.
Okay. Anyway, Joan Embry is here tonight.
And she's now 32.
That's right.
Through the chaos, Ed kept cutting off Joan's actual introduction, growing oddly emotional for no apparent reason and slipping into confusion over things he had just said moments earlier. Finally, Carson reached his limit. He quickly called Joan out to salvage the segment, executing a delicate rescue that few viewers would ever notice. It became one of those rare Tonight Show moments where the usually impeccable Ed McMahon appeared visibly intoxicated, rambling, argumentative, and completely off his usual rhythm, leaving Carson to improvise and regain control. Number 3, Truman Capote. In 1980, Truman Capote arrived for his interview clearly intoxicated, delivering one of the most uncomfortable segments in the show's history. Capote had a reputation for this kind of behavior across other programs, but that night, his charm was nowhere to be found, leaving the audience and Carson alike in a tense,
"Well, I've been to bed, but
to sleep is what I meant.
A number of people."
Can I ask you some serious questions?
Sure, you can go right in.
All right.
I feel perfectly
Have you been
fine.
drinking?
You mean very lately?
You have had a history of alcoholism. Millions of people out there have
My
also had
God,
the same problem.
alcohol isn't the least of it.
He could barely make it to the guest chair. Truman Capote shuffled his feet, steadying himself on Johnny's desk before collapsing into the seat. His eyes were glassy, and when he greeted Johnny, it was clear that hope alone wouldn't salvage the situation. Every word he slurred, much of it unintelligible, leaving the audience in stunned silence. This was Truman Capote, one of America's most celebrated authors, the man who wrote in cold blood, and he could barely form a coherent sentence. When Carson asked about his latest writing project, Capote launched into a bizarre, meandering story about a Hamptons party and someone's dog. He would start a sentence, forget its point, begin another, and lose that thread as well. At one point, he turned toward Ed McMahon, dead serious, and asked if he could sit in his lap. Ed laughed nervously. Johnny tried to regain control, but Capote grabbed a glass of water and missed his mouth entirely. The rim hit his chin, spilling down his shirt, and he didn't notice. The audience was frozen. This was no funny drunk moment, it was unsettling. After roughly 7 excruciating minutes, Johnny called for an early commercial break. When the segment returned, they managed just 2 more minutes before ending it. Capote shuffled off stage and was never invited back. The clip became infamous, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, too intoxicated to sit upright, unraveling on national television. Number 4, Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters was notorious for arriving sloshed, but her 1974 appearance became legendary. From the moment she appeared, she was a hurricane, interrupting Johnny nonstop, talking over him and the other guests, and ignoring every question thrown her way. 2 other guests were on set that night, trying to speak, only to be steamrolled by her relentless monologue. At one point, she targeted a young actor promoting his first major film. Shelley grabbed his knee, mocked the movie, called it boring, and declared his performance wooden. The actor froze, horror etched across his face. Johnny tried to defend him, but she ignored him entirely. Then, noticing Johnny's note cards on the desk, she snatched the whole stack and flung it behind the couch. Papers scattered across the floor. Carson sat speechless, and the audience gasped audibly. Shelley carried on as if nothing had happened. After 12 minutes of chaos, Johnny finally gave up, looking into the camera to announce an early commercial break. NBC producers quickly blacklisted her, telling her agent she would not be welcome back for nearly 3 years. When she eventually returned, she had to promise to show up sober and keep her antics in check. Number 5, Orson Welles. Orson Welles was known to drink heavily before Tonight Show appearances, but his 1975 visit reached new extremes. He had consumed multiple bottles of wine before arriving, setting the stage for a performance that would become part of television legend. When Orson Welles arrived at the studio, crew members had already spotted him drinking in his dressing room. Walking onto the set, it was clear he was tipsy, yet he was Orson Welles, so he was simultaneously eloquent, brilliant, and completely intoxicated. Johnny asked one question, and Welles launched into a 14-minute non-stop monologue. He began with insightful Shakespeare analysis, detoured into stories about his own career, circled back to theater history, and then veered into an obscure anecdote about a Hungarian director nobody had heard of. At one point, Welles attempted to quote Hamlet, got 3 lines in, forgot the original, and improvised entirely new Shakespeare-style lines, delivered with complete confidence. Johnny waited for an opening to interject. There never was one. 14 minutes straight. Carson glanced at the camera with a look that screamed, "I have lost control." The audience was riveted. Even drunk, Orson Welles was more fascinating than most sober guests. But it was pure chaos, no structure, just Orson on wine, speaking whatever came to mind live on television. Despite it all, Carson kept inviting him back. When Welles was good, he was unmatched brilliance. The gamble was always which version would show up. Number 6, Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed was the only guest on this list Johnny never allowed on air. Scheduled for 1973, Reed was a rising Hollywood star, promising entertainment, but NBC executives had seen his drunken meltdowns on other shows, dropping his pants, insulting hosts, demanding alcohol, even getting violent. They showed Johnny the footage. He watched, considered, and made the call, cancel the appearance. Reed never appeared on Tonight Show during Carson's 30-year tenure. Afterwards, Reed mocked Carson publicly, calling him scared and uptight. But Johnny had seen enough chaos to know Reed would have been a liability. Number 7, Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole could deliver genius or chaos, sometimes both. His 1978 appearance leaned heavily on both extremes. He arrived reeking of an afternoon of drinking. Carson asked about Lawrence of Arabia, and O'Toole ignored the question, instead delivering a brilliant lecture on acting techniques. Then he spiraled into confused rambling, circled back to brilliance, then rambled again. At one point, he snatched Johnny's pen and turned it into a fencing foil, forcing an impromptu on-camera fencing lesson. He later launched into wild, unfiltered stories about Richard Harris, chaotic, irreverent, yet somehow captivating. The audience loved it. Johnny kept inviting him back because sloshed Peter O'Toole was consistently more interesting than most sober guests. Number 8, Foster Brooks. Foster Brooks built a career on playing drunk, slurred speech, stumbling, forgetting names. But staff noted that at least 2 of his Tonight Show appearances were affected by actual pre-show drinking. On one particular night, Brooks slipped out of character mid-routine, slurring for real and losing track of the act. Johnny immediately pivoted, turning the moment into comedy without embarrassing Brooks, but behind the scenes, it was clear, the line between performance and reality had been blurred. Number 9, Robert Blake. Robert Blake's visits were tense, especially after heavy drinking backstage. Staffers described him that night as full of liquid courage. He arrived confrontational, constantly interrupting Johnny while the host tried to steer him toward promoting his film. Instead, Blake launched into a rant attacking Hollywood phoniness, derailing the segment entirely. Afterward, Carson told producers to avoid booking Blake if he had been drinking, an unofficial rule that would guide future scheduling.